And on today's show, how to address the 5 consumer retirement fears. Part 4 of this week's series on annuity retirement income with nationally recognized retirement expert, Curtis Cloke. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician in Innsmouth. Let's get down to business. Well, welcome to day 4, Curtis.
Thank you, Steve.
Well, I want to talk about the 5 fears. I mean, this is something that we talk about. We're doing a consumer show on this. I'm amazed that this is the psychological profile of our clients, that this comes up every time. And I don't know if you've done this in order or not, but it looks to me like this is pretty much prioritized. So let's talk about the first one, because this is the #1 fear out on the street in retirement. Regular consumer clients are freaked out about outliving their money.
Yes, so I'm going to do a quick segue here, Steve, maybe you're not going to expect, but there's a new study out there because of Obamacare and the rising healthcare costs that maybe for now, because of this new elevated discussion going on right now in our country about healthcare and the fact that so many people have been affected by higher costs, and there are a few of my clients that actually it helped, but the bottom line is there may be a temporary focus on medical expenses and healthcare that may be double for outliving their money. So I don't have that up on here, but I think that's a new focus and probably well placed. But really, the #1 risk in retirement that most clients have when they walk across the threshold of my office is the fundamental question: I got this pile of money, I have a few retirement income sources, a Social Security, maybe a pension, maybe not. I want to retire on X date. I have this movie I've been playing in my mind about what that's going to look like. Do I have enough? Is it plausible that I do? So outliving their money is certainly the #1.
Now, of course, you're a huge retail representative. You're an advisor. You're doing somewhere between 12 million when you're not speaking of fixed. I mean, you're doing a lot of annuities. Almost all of that's in non-FINRA. And you're also doing serious target premium, anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million a year. When you see people come through your debt, we're talking a real live client. So we're not doing something that's apocryphal, or we're just doing this as an example. This is all pulled out of your practice.
Yeah, everything I'm talking about is live and dynamic, and it's real. But I've been at this since 1987.
When they walk through your door, that's your #1 goal. Then I have to take care of that issue.
Understand that this is nearly the first thing I do when I get into the client presentation with our consumer. Why is this so important? Because they don't really care about the math until they know that you have personally connected with them. And so they need to be heard. And until they're heard, there's nothing that I have to say academically for which they are going to give a rip. Now, they may give a rip, but they may not hear me if they don't believe they've been heard. So this is the front end of the discussion, so as that we can sort out what's important to them. Now, here's why this is critical too. Many of the things they're most worried about may in fact not be the things that they should actually be worried about. It doesn't matter if they should actually be worried about them or not until they have regurgitated them and had the opportunity with my empathy and understanding to listen and hear them and then say it back in a way that we connect. 75% of the decision to work with me or do retirement planning is emotional. 25% is the financial.
Wow, that blows my mind. And these things come up like outliving your money. That's all over the internet right now. Control of your money.
Yes, and people don't understand that when they say they want to control their money, the way in which they perceive they get control may be the complete opposite of what they believe. Understand that I have to finance income flow. And once I find out what the income flow, if I have to finance that income flow with yields and interest at these rates, at these low interest rates that are going on out there, the reality is I may have to hold a large chunk of my portfolio hostage. And yeah, I've got technical control of it, but I've got a gun to my head. Income or cash. I'm going to have to leave that cash alone, and I've got to leave enough hostage to fund that flow. Well, if I can shrink the present value down 20, 30% to buy that income and unfetter the rest for liquidity growth and whatever the heck I want to do with it, I get more control. The third one is rising inflation. Now, I used to have to convince people, 10 years ago this was a big deal. Today, they're telling me they're as concerned and focused on this as maybe I am. So they get this one right. Now, leaving the legacy. This is maybe half the time, but I will tell you that half the time is still high enough on the top 5 list. It's still on the top 5 list. Not everybody cares about a legacy as much as they care about the other things, but it's still really important to many of the clients. The last one is investment mistake. And understand investment mistake is 2 prongs. Because of the Bernie Madoffs of the world, they don't know who to trust. They don't know if they can trust me if they don't know me, despite what they've heard about me, good or bad. But because they don't know who to go to and they don't know who to trust, they go it alone. And now who makes the investment mistake? Well, they do. So these are the 5 fears that they have most common. And then that new one, medical care.
In your retail practice, I mean, you've been doing this a long time. You are a top of the table MDRT, Forum 400 recipient. Are these the things that you go through pretty much, even though you're letting the client talk, you're letting them have, you're doing a pastoral moment here, they're conversing with you, really unearthing their heart. Do you almost touch all these points?
And you know, it's amazing. Yes, they do. And in fact, I just did a case with a large estate planner down in Sarasota, Florida, here not too long ago. And we were dealing with a client with $35 million. And here's what I find. It doesn't matter how many zeros on the back end of that number. This tends to be relative most of the time, no matter whether you're talking to Johnny Lunch Bucket or whether you're talking to a high net worth client, because it's all relative to the portfolio and lifestyle. And when I got done with this, I had one of those clients down there in Sarasota look me right in the eye with $35 million of assets and say, you hit the nail right on the head. In fact, they had friends, 12 of them, if I remember correctly, that were working with Bernie Madoff. And they were heckled often at their parties with their friends about why they wouldn't work with Bernie Madoff. And of course, they look today like pretty smart individuals because they never did. But these people today are more focused on that maybe than they are is this investment mistake. Our goal is to help them structure a plan to alleviate these fears and allow them to retire with some element of confidence. And until I connect with them emotionally, until they can tell their story and feel like they've been heard, might as well save my breath.
Well, we'll be right back after this break, and we'll do more with Curtis on another concept that I think you're going to find really interesting. We'll be right back. Back in the day, life insurance professionals were called field underwriters. Then, carriers trained their field force in the basics of life insurance underwriting. Today, the insurance industry doesn't educate the agent population as they once did. But now you can have the Informed Risk Guide at your fingertips so you can illustrate a reasonable rate class for your life insurance prospects. Just request your copy of the Informed Risk Guide at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. It's free from Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, welcome back to our second segment. I love this allegory about, everybody is so in tune to accumulation, right? But we never think about de-accumulation or distributions. I like this idea you talk about. You use this allegory of a mountain climber, this kind of motif. Why don't you walk me through that for a second? Because I think it's excellent and be really good for our advisors to use this with their clients.
Yeah, so here's the question. When you're climbing a mountain, what's the goal?
Get to the summit.
Yeah. Was it to get to the summit? Or when you get to summit, you had to pack a bag, did you not?
I did.
And you packed a bag to get to the summit. But when you pack that bag, it's not necessarily just to get to the top. It's to get back to camp. Where do 2/3 of the mountain climb actually cause a death in the mountain climb? During the descent, right?
It is.
And what?
Wait, let me stop you there. That's an axiom in mountain climbing, that it's the descent. 2/3 of the accidents are going to happen on the way down.
Right. See, trying to accumulate money, obviously we have some skin knees and some skin noses along the way. We have some regret, things that we know, hindsight in 2020, we could have done better. But quite frankly, until we actually pull the trigger and we're retired and we still have our jobs, we can do a lot of do-overs. There's not, it certainly is helpful for us to be able to rebuild or work longer. We have all those choices when we're accumulating money. And you know what? Virtually everybody in the business that's an agent advisor that's collecting money, helping people grow assets, everybody's an accumulation expert, so to speak. But it takes skill, knowledge, and engineering, understanding to actually help a person unwind the order of distribution and know not to run out based upon the risks associated with it.
How important is the sequence of events on qualified and non-qualified during retirement period?
It's not even close to being the same thing. And how you mitigate that is very, very important. And so understand that when you pack the bag, it's more important to pack the bag with the descent to camp in mind than it is necessarily just to get to the summit. So it's building that pack that bag, and it's the combination of the right tools. And so we try to equip advisors with their backpack of tools, so to speak, for retirement descent in a way that metaphorically works with this idea of a mountain climb. I'm accumulating, and now I'm coming back to camp, and I want to get there safely. And so what was applicable in the accumulation during distribution, they're not even the same rules, and I must know the difference.
Now, this is interesting because I think people look at, like I look at the lost decade. I've seen several shows and slides that say, look what happened in that 10 years. We had 4 loser years with the S&P, 2001, 2, and 3, and 2008. And we look at that and they just say, look at the accumulation though. A lot of our products did well, our insurance products did well. But if I took the same distribution during that time period, we'd be talking a different language.
Oh, just think about if you would have been lucky enough to retire just at or just after, you know, the debacle March of 2000. So let's say you retired right in 2000 and you had your money in the S&P 500, just making it up. Amazingly, over 10 years, if you just needed a 4% withdrawal or 3% withdrawal, inflated at 3% over that 10-year period of time, you would have cut more than half of your portfolio just distributing money for income had you set it up that way. I'm not suggesting anybody would necessarily do it that way, but I'm saying if you just look at the S&P 500 and just a 10-year period of time with maybe 20 to go, you know, if you started a reasonable period of time in your 60s, the reality is you've in that decade, we call the lost decade, you would not have made it. Now, even if you'd have just invested money in the S&P 500, never added to it, never taken away, you would have not had as much as you put in 2009. 10 years was an example of where, you know, that red zone that we hear Prudential talk about, the 5 years before and the 5 years after. No, we now know that it could be a 10-year before issue, 10-year after.
When you think about, you're trying to get people to think about this because of the emotion involved, and this issue of descent, deaccumulation. There's so many earmarks or demarcation lines. I got Social Security demarcation line. I got 70.5 RMD demarcation line. I got mortality when I think the male's going to die, the female's going to die. There's a lot of demarcation lines along the grid. Your plan and the way you think is so integrated. It takes on all this. When you say engineering, I don't doubt your word. It really takes a lot of what I would call analytic scheming. But I've noticed that there's so much like this, the power of using some of these plans like the bulldozer, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, and Canex and all these other, they really bring to bear the mathematics. There's no more guessing about this. This is the logic of math using these, what I would call insured products. And by the way, Curtis, is there any other investment asset that I can use to insure all these things we're talking about?
Well, let's talk about that for a second. See, you know, clients like the idea of being able to protect, you know, their growth. They like the idea of protecting their income, and they like the idea of mitigating the risk of longevity because they're not really focused on that. They look at average life expectancies of the U.S. American citizen, and they're focused on, but in reality, that's the number one risk. It multiplies every other risk. And so the question is, can you guarantee anything with a stock or a bond or a real estate investment trust or even a piece of real estate? Heck no, you can't. How do you guarantee anything? It requires a discussion of some insurance product. So if we want guarantees, not saying we do, but if we do, we cannot do or build or engineer this retirement plan, at least without putting in as part of the components of that engine of retirement for our clients, unless we're bringing in traditional investments in combination with guarantees associated with these insurance products that we've been discussing. And
you've targeted those guarantees as your floor commitments to take care of the expenses we know we're going to be saddled with during retirement.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, before moving forward, any of the ideas on our show, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance officer. Missed an episode? You can go out and view all our past episodes at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. And remember, you could be wiser as an Ash Brokerage advisor. I'm Steve Savant. See you tomorrow.